This video is an introduction to galvanic cells. These cells are sometimes also called voltaic cells. And these are electrochemical cells which produce electrical current from a spontaneous chemical reaction. And really we know that this reaction is two reactions. It's an oxidation half reaction and a reduction half reaction, which are working together. These involve the transfer of electrons from one substance to another, and that is how the electrical current is generated. Here on the right is an example of a spontaneous redox reaction, which is not yet a galvanic cell. But this is a spontaneous redox reaction where zinc is transferring electrons to copper. So we have a zinc strip in a solution of copper ions, and zinc turns into an ion, so zinc is oxidized, and copper is reduced, and copper is plated onto here. But this happens all together, and so when it happens together, the electrical current sort of flows between the atoms, but it's not useful in that it doesn't run through any circuit. So if we want to have a useful voltaic cell, then we actually need to separate the half reactions and force the electrons to be transferred in another way. So here is an example of a galvanic or voltaic cell which uses that same reaction between zinc and copper, only now these are separated. So we have the zinc strip over here and we have a copper strip over here. This solution includes zinc ions and this one includes copper ions, and you can see at the atomic level sort of what's happening here. So the zinc is being oxidized and the electrons are flowing out through the wire. They could be used to do something useful like light up this light bulb. And then the electrons come down through the copper and they join up with the copper ion in order to reduce the copper and form more copper metal. So this is an example of how this would work. In this particular case, zinc is losing electrons more easily than copper. Which is how we know that the reaction runs spontaneously in this particular problem. Right, so the electrons are going in this direction, as the picture shows. In this setup, the metal bars are the electrodes, and you'll see here they're labeled as the anode and the cathode. We'll talk more about those in just a second. The last part of this cell to notice is this salt bridge here in the middle, and the salt bridge contains this potassium nitrate, and that allows for the transfer of ions in order to maintain charge neutrality in these solutions, because if the charge built up, then the electrons would actually stop flowing. So let's take a closer look at the different kinds of electrodes. So we have two types of electrodes that operate in electrochemical cells. And for a voltaic cell, the anode is where oxidation occurs. And the cathode in a voltaic cell is where reduction occurs. And these occur at this specific electrode because of the direction that the reaction moves. The anode is labeled with the negative sign. And in this spontaneous reaction, the anode is the part which releases electrons. That's sort of the source of the electrons. The cathode is labeled with the positive sign. And the cathode is where electrons are collected. So this summary, again, this is for galvanic or voltaic cells. And that's sort of an overview of how galvanic cells work and how they look.